Hey everyone, hello again. It's Naomi Wolf, and I kind of set myself a goal of reading the 1560 Geneva Bible every day this week and seeing what that does. Um, so thank you and welcome. And if you're following this series, you know that we left off with Leviticus 11. Very intense chapter about the deaths of um, two of the sons of Aaron, the priest, and because they disobeyed him. And that was actually Leviticus 10 and Leviticus 11. Also quite challenging, as you know, was what God wants us to eat, basically, and the list of pure and impure foods. Animals that the animals that are pure, tahor, for us to eat, and the animals that are impure, tameh. And we talked a lot about purity versus impurity. So I will just be very frank, as I always am with you on this journey, and say that Leviticus 12, like this whole section of Leviticus, is a lot to process because we're in a world that is so alien from the modern world and modern expectations and modern human relationships, and a world, as I said last time with Leviticus 11, in which people are literally hearing for the first time that there are restrictions on what they can and should do beyond survival, beyond living like an animal. I mean, there certainly was religion at this time, but the idea of sort of pure and impure as a matter of daily life, for people always to be in relationship with a monotheistic God, that's a totally new idea. It hasn't happened before, to our knowledge, in this world, this ancient world. Yes, there have been some suggestions that some of the pharaohs were worshipped the way we worship monotheistic God, but this relationship is new. So it's intense because it's a world of sacrificing pigeons and sacrificing sheep, and people having leprosy and being exiled from the camp. I mean, it's a world that's quite brutal in a way, as seen from a modern perspective. So I'm just acknowledging that, but because of the brutality of it, it almost mattered more that there were these civilizing rules, the Torah, the law, that could distinguish humans from animals, that would distinguish humans from animals, and lead people to aspire beyond just survival, eating whatever, having sex with whomever, being dirty, being unclean, being infectious, all the things that purity laws seem to be intended to address. But above all, over and over, the purity laws seem to be about, God saying, as you remember in the last couple of chapters, be holy because I'm holy. Like, be in a relationship with me. Let's be holy together. You have to be holy. You have to lekadesh yourself in order to be in an intimate relationship with God, me, because, kadoshani, because I am holy. So that's the, relentless theme, here. And really it has been consistently since Genesis, these whole three books. So the chapter we're about to read, I'll just say as a woman, it's quite off-putting, right? In some ways, or it's tough to wrap your brain around because it's about purification after childbirth, and specifically the notion that blood is impure. And this is also true of menstruation, right? It's treated as impure to this day. Orthodox Jews see the week when women menstruate as a time that they should be kind of ritually keeping separate from their husbands, not being intimate with their husbands. And then when their menstrual cycle is done, there's this very, elaborate ritual, which includes a mikveh, a ritual bath, which is actually quite beautiful. And then they're kind of pure again, and free to go be intimate with their husbands. And I mean, that's another conversation, but I've heard really interesting things from Orthodox Jewish women about that. You think it's, incredibly restrictive and kind of punitive, that there's, a whole more than a week, I think. I need to check with Orthodox Jewish women, but a chunk of time out of the month that, a married couple is not supposed to be intimate. But every Orthodox Jewish woman I've spoken to actually says that it's incredibly good for a marriage, and that it makes the time when the woman and the man are free to be intimate again incredibly special and celebratory, and that kind of problem that is so common in modern marriages, where everything is possible all the time, right? Of jadedness really is held at bay by this ritual. So maybe the rabbis or the leaders of the children of Israel were cleverer than one realizes with some of these restrictions, because paradoxically they have the, at least from what I've been told, the lived effect of really being good for families and good for marriage and good for sexuality and intimacy. By the way, I do want to say something about sexuality right now. And for people who are not Jewish, it may seem weird that I'm about to talk about sexuality for a little bit in the context of a reading of the Bible. The Bible is supposed to be so chaste, right? But that's very much a post-Pauline interpolation that's alien to Judaism, meaning the Saul of Tarsus, the disciple of Jesus, who, or the proselytizer on behalf of Jesus, who brought this message of Jesus in many ways quite changed to the world. And what I mean by that is, okay, bear with me, I'm giving you a little background. St. Paul, who wrote all the Pauline texts of the New Testament, he was not a Jewish Jew, right? He was a Jew, and he had a dramatic experience of he had been persecuting Christians, and then had an encounter with Yeshua, and then became Yeshua's kind of most famous acolyte and publicist. But he really didn't come from a traditional Jewish background. He came from a Hellenized Jewish background, meaning a very elaborately Greco-Roman culture, not the deeply Jewish culture that Yeshua came from, being a working class, illiterate, probably Jewish man, and certainly not the culture of all of the Judaism that extended from this period in Sinai, when Judaism was just being kind of invented, all the way up to the 1st century AD, Jesus's time. And what I mean by that is, Paul is very critical of sexuality, as you know, and has a lot of restrictions, and says, it's better to marry than to burn, for instance, and is, encourages people to be physically chaste, even married people. And this is a very Hellenistic, actually a Stoic philosophy. It is not Jewish. It is an overlay of Hellenism on his Jewish birth, right? It's culturally incredibly alien from Judaism. And so there's a very interesting thing that happened in history, which is, Judaism continued to treat sexuality the way it does, which I'll tell you in a minute, and post-Pauline Christianity, especially, not to even mention the 4th century, saints and martyrs, and fathers who were very influential philosophers and kind of shaped the early church, but they were chaste, they were celibate, they were like Simon Stylites, they were up on a pillar in the middle of the desert, not eating, not drinking, not having sex with women. And then you get this whole lineage of priests and the church, and the notion of celibacy being the ultimate good, and of course the notion of Mary's virginity. That's another rabbit hole a little bit. Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf of Daily Clout. Have you ever wondered why your brain can feel foggy even when you're eating clean and exercising? It might not be burnout, it could be parasites. Groundbreaking research from Dr. Alan MacDonald reveals a direct link between chronic parasite infections and neurological diseases such as multiple sclerosis. Parasites can cause inflammation, nerve damage, and long-term cognitive decline. More reason to do a full body cleanse at least once a year. The Wellness Company has a solution for you: ivermectin and mebendazole, the gold standard parasite solution, now combined in one cleanse combo, designed to eliminate harmful invaders and support your immune system naturally. Medical grade, not some trendy herbal gimmick. Fill out a quick intake form and you'll get a 3-month supply shipped straight to your door. Maha is officially here, and the Wellness Company is making hard to get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. Head to dailyclout.health and use code dailyclout to save $60 off plus free shipping on all orders. Cleanse your body today. Get rid of parasites today. Thank you. I don't want to upset anyone, but in the original text, the description of Mary could mean virgin, or it could mean young woman. So I'm not arguing with, the theology of Mary's blessed virginity and Christianity. I respect Christianity. However, what I'm trying to describe is these two religions that came out of the same root, right? The identical root. In some ways, they didn't separate very much, in terms of like the 10 Commandments and, one God and so on. But in terms of how sexuality was treated, totally different. And, to this day, my husband's Roman Catholic, and he jokes about, the kind of complex kind of guilt and shame messages that, Catholic children can be brought up with. I'm not saying everyone. And every Christian sect has a variation of the kind of critical approach to sexuality, suspicious, I would say, approach to sexuality, even within marriage, that descends from, St. Paul and his philosophy of Stoicism and the valorization of celibacy. No disrespect to Christianity, but I'm now going back to this early iteration of what would become Judaism, all the way through the millennia till Jesus's birth, and then the 2 millennia, after the destruction of the temple, right to this present day. Judaism doesn't have that tradition. It really doesn't. In fact, it has a very, I would say, opposite tradition around sexuality, and it certainly is not endorsing, adultery. I mean, very bad, right? It's in the 10 Commandments: don't commit adultery, or threesomes, or promiscuity. And a lot of bad things happen to people who have sex outside of marriage in the Hebrew Bible. We'll get to those. However, Judaism is very, 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 very enthusiastic about sex within marriage. and sees it as a blessing and as a gateway to higher, intimacy with God, even, and as a metaphor for the union. It's between masculine and feminine in the universe and in God's creation. And even there's a notion that there's a feminine aspect to God, Shekhinah, which is metaphorized sometimes with this metaphor of the sacred union of the couple. The Shabbat herself, the Sabbath, is represented as a bride, as I mentioned, and the joy of the coming of the Sabbath bride is, a metaphor for, intimacy, union, physical union, or physical union is a metaphor for the Sabbath. So it's very much thumbs up to sex within marriage in Judaism, all the way back to this desert people wandering around trying to figure out where they're going, listening to Moshe. There's nothing but positive recognition, celebration of sex within specific confines of marriage, right? And one of the confines is what I just told you about, the kind of setting aside of the time of a woman's menstrual cycle to not be intimate then, and the purification that she goes through. And by the way, a mikveh, you also have a mikveh before you get married. I actually had a mikveh before I got married, both times. And it's this notion that it very much derives from this period in the desert. You'll notice that Yahweh, God, is often saying to Moshe, when someone's in a state of impurity, that they should bathe themselves and clean their clothes. And so this notion of a ritual bath, which is part of purification, goes all the way back to this time in the desert. And where does it extend to? You know where I'm going. Baptism, of course, descends from this early instruction from Yahweh that people who want to purify themselves should bathe in a ritualistic way or clean themselves in a ritualistic way. So there you have it. And so now that I've given you that background, I'm going to go ahead and read this chapter. It's a short chapter. And again, it's going to be a bit difficult, especially if you're a female, because it posits, childbirth as unclean. So let's go ahead and read this in 1560 Geneva Bible. And as I always say, you can order the beautiful book if you can afford it. Gorgeous, hardcover, gigantic. Excuse me. And it's it's a facsimile, so you can see exactly the illustrations and the footnotes in the 1560 version. Or if you can't afford that, don't worry, just go to 1560genevabible.com and you will, or genevabible.com, and you will have it right there on a PDF. So chapter 12, a law, how women should be purged after their deliverance. Now, this is interesting. It's the first time I'm reading that verb purged, and it's less awful, right? It's almost like healed. So, and after their deliverance, of course, is 16th century language for delivering a baby, their childbirth. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel and say, when a woman has brought forth seed, and meaning, well, that's how they thought women got pregnant then, and born a man child, she shall be unclean 7 days, like as she is unclean when she is put apart for her disease. So that means when she's menstruating. And in the 8th day, the foreskin of the child's flesh shall be circumcised, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, holy thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the time of her purifying be out. But if she bear a maid child, a little girl, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as when she has her disease. And she shall, meaning her menstruation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. Now, when the days of her purifying are out, whether it be for a son or for a daughter. She shall bring to the priest a lamb of 1 year old for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Who shall offer it before the Lord and make an atonement for her? So she shall be purged of the issue of her blood. This is the law for her, that she has borne a male or female. But if she be not able to bring a lamb, she shall bring 2 turtles, meaning 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, the one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her, so she shall be clean. Very, very interesting. And let's see whether the Revised Standard Version has anything notable about it. Till the days of her purifying are completed. Well, this is interesting that it's much more graphic, but if she bears, this is line 5, if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks as in her menstruation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. And otherwise it's quite similar. So let's now take a look at the Hebrew, as we always do in Chabad. And you can go to chabad.org and look at the Hebrew, which by now you probably speak. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. And I'm sure you know what that means by now. And spoke God toward Moshe to say, Daber, and you remember that play always of Yedaber, Daber, speak, thing, right? Daber, speak, El Bnei Israel, toward the children of Israel, Lomar, to say, Isha ki tazria, a woman who, tazria, a zaroa is a seed, so it is a woman who seeds, like a verb, right? Now, it's translated as conceives. You do need to know that people didn't understand till like the Renaissance how babies were conceived. And for a while, they actually thought that women, emitted seeds that turn into babies, just like flower bulbs bloom into flowers, right? They didn't understand the role of men very clearly, or the role of semen, as being the agent of, seed, essentially. That happened later. Isha ki tazria, a woman who seeds, v'yalda zachar, and she gives birth to a male, that tamah shiv'at yamim, she'll be unclean. Remember that word tameh, 7 days. Yemei nidat dota, as in the days of her menstrual flow. Titma, she is unclean or impure. It's, honestly, it's good for me to read the Hebrew because it's really not unclean and clean. It's really pure and impure. So the state of impurity, I would say, is a lot more technical. If you're like me and you're getting to that age at which your body sometimes just hurts all the time, please listen. Don't reach for another painkiller until you learn about this turmeric hack for pain and inflammation. You've probably already heard that turmeric is being used to fight inflammation and joint pain, but not all turmeric is created equal. Regular turmeric powder in your pantry will help you a little, but a leading pain doctor from Connecticut discovered a special turmeric extract that is 200 times more powerful than what you find in standard turmeric. And when he shared this turmeric secret with his patients, the results were extraordinary. This turmeric extract attacks pain at the source, turning it off like a light switch, so that pain not only often goes away, but stays away. Dr. Josh, the brains behind it all, has spent 20 years helping hundreds of thousands of Americans finally break free from constant aches and stiffness, and his turmeric hack has been the backbone of their success. So don't engage, if you can avoid it, with expensive surgeries, pain injections, or inefficient over-the-counter medications with side effects. Greet pain-free living. It's incredible stuff. I started taking it regularly, and I really did notice a difference. Again, you can't just take any old turmeric. If you want to learn more about Dr. Josh's turmeric secret and the exact method for how to use it in your routine, go to goldenrevive.com/daily cloud. The link is right below this video in the description. Click on it and start your journey toward a pain-free, healthier life. And less like, ew, you're unclean, right? I mean, she's definitely impure, in a state of impurity, having given birth. Uvayom hashmini, and on the 8th day, yimol besar arlato, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. And that's where the tradition of circumcision comes from, which we still do it. And Christians do it, Jews do it. It's a huge part of the debate that will happen when Yeshua, appears on the earth, and his followers, especially in Paul's writing, debate being circumcised, because non-Jews didn't want to be circumcised, understandably enough, but they wanted to follow Yeshua. So it was very much a flashpoint. And in this early period, being circumcised was a very visible, visible in kind of war, in other contexts, a recognizable way that the children of Israel, the men of the children of Israel, were set apart from other men, right? There are other things they do that are different. And this is definitely a theme. God is saying to the children of Israel that there are a bunch of things he wants them to do to set them apart from all the people around them who are worshiping Baal and throwing their babies in the fire and, eating anything and having sex with anyone and having sex with slaves and, being kind of gross. So circumcision is one of those things that God asks for. And we still do it, right? It's fascinating. And it derives from this. And if you're circumcised, this chapter is, I think it's the first that, no. There was some in Exodus mention of circumcision, but this is, here are the details. On the 8th day, you're circumcised. Shloshim yom, and for 30 days, ushloshet, and 3 yamim, days, teshev bidmei tahara. She will really sit in the bloods of purity. So this is so interesting. I was always taught that this section was about impurity. The blood makes you impure, but here it's saying in the bloods of purity. Bechol kodesh lo tiga, in all that is holy. Bechol kodesh lo tiga. You remember the word kodesh. In everything that is holy, she shouldn't touch. She mustn't touch. Ve'el hamikdash, and to the mikdash, the holy of holies, the tent of meeting, same root, kadosh mikdash, lo tavo, she's not to come, ad mlot yemei tehara, until the fullness of the days of her purification. In other words, until they've been completed. So in the original Hebrew, it's not about impurity. It's about purity. She's purifying herself. Ve'im nekeva, and if a female, tiled, she gave birth to, the root is yeled, which is child or boy, but in this case, childbirth, right? Tiled. Vetam'a shvuim, she'll be unclean, right? You remember tameh. Shvu'ayim, 2 weeks. Shavua is a week. Ke nidata, like when she's menstruating. Veshishim yom vesheshet, and 60 days and 6 yamim. Teshev al dmei tehara, she will sit on the bloods of purity or purification. So that's really interesting. The way I was taught about this section, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting myself, but it's fascinating to me. I didn't expect to be this interested. The way this section was taught to me, it was very much with a feminist slant, very critical. This was presented by not Orthodox Jews to me, by kind of feminist women who were kind of upset about how they read the treatment of Jewish women, or women and the children of Israel, in this section. It was taught to me that Judaism, was patriarchal religion that sent women away to be all by themselves after childbirth or when they were menstruating, and treated them as unclean. It's fascinating to read and you get that in the Revised Standard Version, but in the Hebrew, it's about the bloods of purity. So definitely it's about women recovering from bleeding, right? Like that is definitely an unclean state to be bleeding in this culture. But the process that this woman is going through after having a baby is one of being purified, including the blood of purification. So that it's totally different. I can't believe how different it is. It's like patriarchal translations introduced this misogyny, but it's not so it's not so misogynistic in the original. She'll remain in the blood of purity, and remember, she's nursing a baby. So the other thing to think about, and people have kind of explained this to me who are Orthodox women, is it's hard to give birth, God knows, and definitely in the middle of the desert with no anesthetic, and little understanding of hygiene, it would have been difficult and dangerous to give birth. And in the other cultures around the children of Israel, men wouldn't hesitate to have intercourse with women as soon as possible if they wanted to after the women gave birth. So that is really hard on a woman, right? And she's also, nursing, and she's recovering from childbirth. So it's been explained to me that this is also a very compassionate passage for women, because it keeps them from having to, in these days, marital rape wasn't even legally wrong. If you were married to a man, you were basically his chattel. He owned you, and he could use you sexually any way he wanted, and you really couldn't say no. It wasn't that came much, much later in human civilization. But this is a way to kind of put a protection, in a way, around a woman who's recovering from childbirth and nursing a baby, and giving her a month or 2 months, depending, to recover, essentially. So that's an interesting way to read it as well. And okay, ube mlot yemei tehara, and when the days of her purification have been completed. No, it's even, and in the fulfillment of the days of her purity, right? So really, these days of being set apart are days of purity, not of impurity. Leven o labat, whether it's to a son or a daughter, tavi keves, she'll bring a sheep, ben shnato, in its first year, leola u venyona, as a burnt offering, and a young dove, o tor, or turtle dove, lechetat, as a sin offering. And that root chet is there, and it can mean sin, but it can also mean miss the mark, right? El petach ohel moed, to the opening of the tent of meeting, el hakohen, toward the priest. Vehikrivu lifnei Adonai, and there's this wording again, which is so beautiful. He will draw near. Lehakriv is to draw near. And he will draw near it, in front of the face. Remember, lifnei, before, but also panaim, in front of the face of God. Vechiper aleha, to atone on her. V'tahara mimkor dameha, and purification from the source of her blood. Zot Torat ha yoledet. This is the law of childbirthing, lezachar or lenekeva, to a male or to a female. Ve'im lo timtza yada dai se, and if she can't afford a sheep, velakha shte torim, she will take 2 turtle doves, or shnei bnei yonah, or 2 young doves, literally children or sons of a dove, echad le'olah ve'echad lechatat, one as a burnt offering and one as a sin offering. Vechiper aleha hakohen, and the Kohen will atone upon her, v'tahera, and she will become clean. So interestingly different than the Revised Standard Version. Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. To make things worse, it's unlikely that your blood circulation will correct itself on its own. This means your health issues will not only continue to decline as you age, they could really become catastrophic. And taking ibuprofen isn't a solution to pain. It's only temporary relief, and it only masks the real problem, which is inflammation. So right now you can go to getkrill.com/dailyclout to learn more and get a special free shipping offer just for being a listener of our show. New research proves there's a potent deep sea supernutrient tucked away 73 miles off the Atlantic coast, which is the hidden key to improving your blood circulation in krill oil. Researchers are saying this Antarctic supernutrient is the key to your diet. And this is indeed omega-3 fatty acid, but not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill, a kind of fish. This omega-3 content from krill oil has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as to reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. Benefits go on and on. In fact, some report it outperforms name brand pain relievers, and they see results in as little as 7 days. It doesn't have the dangerous side effects that ibuprofen does. And better yet, for a short time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic krill oil at up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/dailyclout right now and take advantage of your special offer. You'll really feel better. Thank you so much. And so different from the way this was taught to me, much more respectful. I mean, it's not easy, I'm sure, to be apart, and it's not clear, like, did she have attendance? Could her mom be with her? Could her sister be with her? I assume so, because that baby had to live, and that woman had to recover. So it does seem like it's, and I'm a little bit reading between the lines, it does seem like it's kind of a woman's world, that, world apart of women that you get to be in, that the law of childbirth, right? And it's so nice that there is a law of childbirth. I can't believe I'm saying this, because this section has been taught to me my whole life as if it's the worst thing that could ever happen to women, or one of the most insulting things. And the original is so different. But it does seem as if a woman who's just given birth gets to, rest, right? Surrounded by women, and not have to cook, clean, look after her, husband, look after the other children. It does seem as if she's being given, by these circumstances, what every new mom really craves. Maybe not this level of separation, but certainly every new mom wishes that she had nothing else she had to do but bond with her baby and nurse her baby and recover from the rigors of childbirth. So, maybe God's being pretty smart. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be blasphemous. maybe this is not a misogynist section, but a section that shows that God really understood women. Obviously he made women, and understood childbirth. Obviously he made childbirth, and is setting out a law for childbirth that actually lets women heal and recover from childbirth. And the inversion of, pure for impure is so extraordinary. Never in all the time I've heard this passage spoken about do people say, oh yeah, it says that a woman will sit in the purity of her blood. It literally never. It's all about impurity, the way it was described to me. And I kind of want to see the Revised Standard Version and see if that says pure or impure. Levitic, bear with me. I just want to check. RSV, she shall be unclean for 7 days. This is the Revised Standard Version. She shall be unclean for 2 weeks. And yeah, this is kind of awful. This says, she shall continue in the blood of her purifying. Whereas in the Hebrew, it's literally, shall continue in the tameh, in the bloods of her pureness. And those are different sensibilities. In the Revised Standard Version, she is impure, right? And make atonement for her, then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. It's a much more misogynist wording, in my view, in the Revised Standard Version, because, pardon me, this says this is the law for her who bears a child, like she's subject to a law. Whereas in the Hebrew, it says this is the law of childbirth. It's much more dignified. And the other thing that's a different translation, not, much more negative about childbirth and about the woman, this says at the end, line 8, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean, like she's committed a sin. Whereas in the Hebrew, it's he atones upon her. It's like he effects atonement on her. It's like the priest is kind of healing the separateness that she's been through. I'm not sure why it's atonement. I'm not. I mean, that is still pretty tough. But it's not like atoning on her, like ritualistically, is much more positive than Revised Standard Version, than atoning for her. The priest shall make atonement for her, is what it says in the Revised Standard Version. And so she shall be clean. And v'tehera, in the Hebrew, it's and she purifies. Whereas in the Revised Standard Version, it's and she shall become, and she shall be clean. And so in the Hebrew, she's in the process of purifying. She doesn't need the priest, like he's helping with the ritual, but she's in the process of purifying. She's purifying, becoming pure. So I don't know if you can tell me in the comments if you can tell the quite different flavor of that. It's not like, ew, you're so gross. The priest has to make you clean because you're disgusting and you've sinned, and go over there in the bad girl corner. It's not like that at all. It's in the Hebrew, it's about you've given birth, you've got to rest, you've got to be separate, you've got to recover, and you're not tahor, because blood is not tahor, even with the we'll get to ritual slaughter of kosher meat, but blood is impure always, right? And it just is. And I really need to know more about that from someone more knowledgeable about why that would be. But it's not unusual for a kind of ancient culture to have a lot of prescriptions around blood. A lot of cultures treat blood as if it's kind of magical, and even up through the Renaissance and in the early modern period, people thought that menstruating women could curdle milk and cause sickness around them, that or a lot of magic spells use menstrual blood. I don't know about childbirth blood, but blood is definitely considered to have mana, anthropologists say, like power, right? Oh, this is interesting. Yael Avraham says, I've been taught that it was a spiritual condition, not physically unclean. But say more about that, please. Why would it be a spiritual condition of uncleanness? Why is having a baby, which is such a spiritually wonderful thing, a condition of uncleanness? I'd love it if you would write more about that, Yoel Avraham. And let's see. I want to read a little bit from Chabad because it's such a, we've read this chapter and we still have questions, right? So Chabad often, as you found with my last reading of Chabad, exegesis, it interprets the literal text of the Torah in a very metaphorical way. So the wonder of conception is one of the passages in the exposition in the Rebbe.org, which is a Chabad exegesis of the Torah. So here's a paragraph from that. Our sages interpret the expression when a woman conceives as implying that it is she who initiates the intensification of the relationship. That's interesting. Similarly, in the analog, the implication is that man does not merely respond to God. Instead, he taps the core of his being and summons up the energy needed to heighten his connection with him. On this basis, we can understand why the verse highlights the importance of conception rather than birth. Although new life is brought into the world at birth, the fetus already exists. Wow. Conception is the closest example in our lives to the creation of something from nothing. Hasidic thought explains that the potential to create something from nothing lies with God alone. Since he is not, heaven forbid, dependent on any other cause, it is within his ability to create something material in material existence out of absolute nothing. God has imparted his essence to man, and thus the core of every soul, quote, is an actual part of God, end quote. That's cool. As such, man also has the power of creation, but in reverse. He lives in this material world and makes nothing from something, revealing the godly potential that exists within himself and his ephemeral environment. This is the power of conception possessed by, quote, the woman, mankind. So here in this exegesis, we're going back to what I said before I read the chapter, which is often in Judaism, certainly also in Christianity, many of the saints wrote poetry about this. Humanity is described as kind of the bride or the woman, and God is has the male role, and there's a union between them that's romantic and even kind of, I don't want to say sexual because that's reductive, but the metaphor is a sexual union, a consummation, right? So this is the power of conception possessed by the woman, mankind. Through the expression of this potential, we become God's partner in creation, fashioning the world into a dwelling for him. And so that's, a very metaphorical reading of this passage. But it's basically really interesting to me as a woman and as a feminist critic, because basically Chabad is saying the role of the pregnant woman or the woman who's given birth is so important that all of humanity is like a woman who is, manifesting what God is bringing forth within humanity, the way a husband helps to bring forth what's within a pregnant woman. So, and by the way, many mystical saints in the Christian tradition, I believe, especially Hildegard of Bingen, Teresa of Avila, saw the soul as feminine, and Jesus or God as uniting the way a husband and wife unite in this highly romantic and sexualized way. I'm not being literal. It's like a union, right? So Yoel Avraham, he did follow up. Thank you. Unclean is a horrible English translation. Thank you. We don't have an English word to accurately describe this spiritual state. Thank you. So the word is tameh, right? That's what we're talking about. And it's badly translated as unclean when he's right. He's totally right. It's about not being in a state of spiritual alignment, right? And that you have to go through kind of a ritual process or an initiation process in many of these chapters to be tahor, in a state of purity that is spiritual, where God can hang out with you. Is that closer? Is that closer to what you were saying, Mr. Avraham? That certainly makes sense to me. And it's 1,000% correct that unclean is it's not the right word. That's the best I can do. That it's tameh. It's like, remember when I said in Judaism there's and dating back to this period with the children of Israel in the desert. And I always stress that because Judaism hasn't been invented yet. Essentially, it's kind of coming into being in real time as we read. But remember I said there's this essential kind of DNA in Judaism, right? Descending from this time in the Torah, I should say, between Kodesh v'chol, right? Between that which is holy and that the everyday, the poorly translated as profane, the kind of ordinary, the not holy. And I told you it's kind of humanity's job, according to God, pardon me, in these chapters, to learn how to make chol into kodesh, right? To sanctify, to purify. And this is not, again, I've talked about this, but it's so important in Christianity. No disrespect, but our Western tradition of Christianity, that's the priest's job, right? To elevate, to make sacred, to bless. But in Judaism, no, that is your job, right? And so I also think Yeshua was telling everyone, hey, it's your job to, let's go back to the Torah. It's your job to make things holy, to bring the kingdom of heaven. He was saying something very rooted in the Jewish tradition. So in that, keeping in mind that central DNA of Judaism is that division between, profane or ordinary and holy, and that our job is always to get closer to the holy, to do the holy, to do the holinessing, right? There's no verb in English to the holy making, right? Boy, there's so many missing verbs in English that exist in Hebrew. But by the same token, our job is to make pure, right? To letaher. And we are supposed to try to move away from the tameh, the not pure. I think not pure is better than unclean. I don't know if you agree with that, Yoel Avraham, but I just want to say that because that's what, if you keep that in mind, this chapter really does make sense, right? I don't know why childbirth is considered tameh. I really don't. I wish I did. And I would love if someone has some exegesis that can help explain it, please post it or send it to me. I'll need to find out more about that. But for whatever reason, and it could be just this very basic, ancient society blood taboo, right? Or very often primitive cultures or early, early cultures have a barrier around what are called liminal states. In a liminal state, like you're pregnant and then you have a baby, right? A liminal state is when you're crossing from one state to another, or you're alive and then you're dead, right? That's a liminal state. Or you're single and then you're married, right? That's a liminal state. These major changes in your condition. Well, what could be more of a liminal state than having, going from pregnant through the process of childbirth and then recovering from childbirth and having a baby? So it could be, that the separateness, the tameh quality of childbirth and recovering from childbirth is, simply has to do with that. It's an altered state. It's a separate state. I literally need to find a feminist exegete to help me understand, or even a rabbi who will speak frankly to me about this, from the Orthodox tradition. But I will just leave it by saying, in the Hebrew, you're not unclean. You're in the state that's not pure, which is different. It's more like everyday, ordinary, not able to join in the sacred context at the Temple of Meeting, for reasons we don't have in this chapter. So that's it. That's what we've got. That's what I've shared with you. It's a short chapter. Let's see if there are any other comments that I should share with you. Lots of spam and weird bot commentary. Dave Whitehead says, "Hi, Miss Wolf. Do you read only the Geneva Bible?" Well, in these readings, as you all may know who follow them, we actually read 3 versions of the same text. We read the 1560 Geneva Bible, and I chose that because the people who've come along this journey know this, but I'll just share it anyway for the people who have just joined us. The 1560 Geneva Bible is a very accurate English translation, and it's also, it comes out of a tradition which is very much like, the tradition of the Torah, I would say, in which the Protestant reformers who fled to Geneva, Switzerland, where it was safe to translate, make this translation from the Hebrew, were driven by the wish to bring the word of God, the literal, actual word of God, the Torah, to everyone. As one of them famously said, he wanted to make it possible for any shepherd boy or plow boy to read the word of God. And so they translate it very accurately, but they also have very kind of down to earth commentary and footnotes. And so I mentioned that because it's the Puritans' Bible, it's Shakespeare's Bible. And because of this constant message they wanted to transmit, not to invent, it's there in the text, as you see, but to manifest in English, I think that drove the Puritans to be able to, leave England and go to a whole new continent and start a city on a hill and defy the greatest, colony, the greatest power on earth at that time, which is England, and so on. And it was Shakespeare's Bible. He wrote some of the greatest works in English that anyone's ever written, if not the greatest. And it was Jefferson's Bible, and Jefferson, helped to create the core philosophy of the United States of America. So I think when you read the Geneva Bible, which is so different from later English translations, which is why I read the Revised Standard Version as a contrast, right? You really see, wow, how are these people so brave and so confident and so imaginative? It's because in the Torah and in the Geneva Bible, God is, right next to them, and with them. And, I always think of that line I mention over and over when Moshe in Exodus is saying, God, don't choose me to engage in this act of leadership of getting people out of Egypt and out of slavery. Um, I'm not a good speaker, and God says, I made your mouth. Like, I'll never forget that, because that's it in a nutshell, right? Like, God's so close and so intimate. Come on, I made your mouth. I know who you are. So that's why I read the 1560 Geneva Bible. The other thing is it's translated from the Hebrew instead of other later Bibles, and even I think earlier Bibles that were translated from Greek and Latin. And as a result, the Geneva Bible has that flavor of Judaism and of the Hebrew, whereas the Greek and Latin derived translations into English go through the language of Hellenism and Stoicism and all the things that I described to you, which are not Jewish, right? They're very interesting. They're very valuable. They created, our Western tradition, but they're not Jewish. And in some ways they're quite antithetical to Judaism and specifically these themes of, very much more of a, humans are gross, humans are unclean, as I mentioned, sex is unclean. The theocratizing of the language, the institutional churchiness of the language comes later, and it definitely comes via the Greek and Latin, and it's not there in the Geneva Bible, which is translated straight from the Hebrew. So that's why I read those. And then and then I read the Chabad text in Hebrew, because I think Hebrew is an absolutely magical language, and I hope on this journey you've seen some examples of that, like words that just there's no way to explain how they have like triple meanings that are perfect in one sentence, right? Or how you can have 3 iterations of the same root in a single sentence that all make sense. In context, like language just doesn't work that way. It's like literally like opening a box of miracles, with every other page. And so I thought it would be really boring for you guys to hear me read the Hebrew. But people are really, the feedback I'm getting is that, non-Hebrew speakers are really loving hearing the Hebrew, this very literal translation I give you of the Hebrew, because the Hebrew is beautiful and because nothing explains the Bible, which was written in Hebrew, like reading it in Hebrew. So that's turning out to be kind of surprisingly welcome. And I think it's important because, there's nothing like going back to the source. I mean, this text has been filtered through so many centuries and so many theologies and creeds and churches and sects and denominations and, fights between denominations and social revolutions. And we don't need all that baggage, in my view, or whatever. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you not to love the translation you may love. I'm just saying, for me, it's been completely life-changing to go back to the Hebrew, which I'd never read. I'd never read the Bible in Hebrew. I've never read all the way through the Hebrew Bible. This is a first for me. I've read sections, of course. I've read chunks. I've read, obviously all of Genesis and all of Exodus, but Leviticus is a different kettle of fish. I've never read all the way through it, and it's completely eye-opening. So we've come to the end of our time. Dave Whitehead says, "Are you a Christian?" I am not a Christian. I am a Jewish Jew. But, and this is maybe a subject for another time, I've been reading a lot about Yeshua, and those of you who follow my work may know that I actually had a couple of inexplicable experiences with a being I identify as Yeshua. And got an email from a reader who said, I was going to end my subscription to your Substack because the spiritual stuff you're writing makes you sound like a crazy person. But, I took that leap. And the more I read about Yeshua and the historical context of Yeshua and the texts that were found at the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Messianic movement among Jews in the first century, the more aware I am of the Jewishness of Jesus. Let's just put it that way, and that a case can be made that he wasn't. Most people who are scholars of the historical Jesus don't believe he thought he was starting a new religion. They believe that he was trying to get people to go back to the essence of the Torah, which is what we're reading. So I am Jewish, but I don't think it's a contradiction to, really love Yeshua and his message because he was Jewish and it was super Jewish. So we can have a discussion about that. And I'm not being disrespectful, but that's just the truth of the historical context. And so I do feel that when I'm bringing you all more, maybe a richer understanding of what Judaism is and says through the Torah, if you're a Christian, I hope it's bringing you closer to Jesus because this was his, this was his book, right? This was what he was preaching. And everyone he was speaking to, heard this book every Sabbath in synagogue. And many of the lessons he taught were based on, what's in this book. By the way, there's something I will mention, and then I will let you go to the rest of your evening. But did you notice 33? Judaism has sacred numbers, actually numerology, and the 33 days that a woman is supposed to be purifying herself after childbirth. There's another sacred number, which was the age that Yeshua was when he was crucified. I don't know if they have any connection, but I just did notice that because some numbers are considered especially sacred. In Judaism, 40 is another one. 7 is another one. We can talk about that another time. So thank you. We've come to the end of our time. Thank you for joining me. And if you like these readings, I ask you to support them by subscribing over on Outspoken on Substack. These videos take a lot of production and distribution and hosting. It takes a lot of resources. And if you can afford that, no worries. Thank you for your interest. And I hope you have a wonderful night. And let's see what happens this week. I'm going to try to read a chapter every single day and see if that opens my eyes in some special way. Thank you. See you tomorrow night. Take care. Bye.